In 1590, 117 English settlers reached the New World and established a colony on the island of Roanoke, in what is now part of North Carolina, only to mysteriously disappear. The fate of these colonists were unknown, but after almost 500 years, archaeologists have uncovered new evidence, perhaps solving one of the greatest mysteries of American history. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to click the thumbs up, subscribe, and enjoy. It was the morning of 18th August, 1590. A group of sailors from two English privateering ships, the Moonlight and the Hopewell, led by John White, governor of Queen Elizabeth I's North American Dominion, Virginia, pulled ashore on the sandy beach of Roanoke Island. White was eager to reunite with his daughter Eleanor and his son-in-law Ananias there, and with all the other English settlers on the island. Eleanor and Ananias were members of the colony White had left on Roanoke Island 3 years earlier. In 1587, White had to return to England, badly in need of supplies from Sir Walter Raleigh for the colonists who had been wintered on Roanoke. But his voyage back to America was beset with problems. On his first attempt, his vessel was captured by French pirates and he was seriously wounded in the fight. His efforts were also frustrated by a royal order to stop all shipping because of Armada threat. Even when White did manage to return in 1590, no one was there. White found that the new strong fort that had been erected was now abandoned, containing only discarded heavy items. All the houses of the settlements had been dismantled and removed. None of the 117 members of this lost colony were ever located. But the mystery doesn't begin here. White's group of civilians hadn't been the first colony that Raleigh sent to Roanoke Island. After his half-brother Sir Humphrey Gilbert drowned on a voyage to Newfoundland, Queen Elizabeth transferred the charter of colonizing North America to Raleigh. Raleigh turned his attention to the North Carolina coast. However, he does take a little detour. Raleigh doesn't go to North America, but he goes to the south in search of the lost city of El Dorado, and in hopes of looting gold and silver from the indigenous in Mexico and Peru. It wasn't until 1584 a single English vessel arrived on the Carolina shores and was soon guided by native peoples to Roanoke Island. Based on its brief visit, Roanoke was described as a land filled with crops, game, and welcoming Indians, a new Eden. From there, they returned to Sir Walter Raleigh to inform him of the find, and they brought along with them some Native Americans from the Croatoan tribe. With all the great news, in 1585, Sir Walter Raleigh sent a couple of more ships with Sir Richard Grenville in charge to set up a new colony on Roanoke Island. About 4 months later, they reached the island, built a settlement, and began building relations with the neighboring tribe of Native Americans on Croatoan Island. Everything was going great with the natives, until someone alleges one of the natives of stealing a silver cup, which ended up in the colonists ransacking and burning down one of the native villages. From then on, the relationship with the Native Americans were not so great, and with food supplies running short, Sir Richard Grenville decides to go back to England to bring back some supplies. But he doesn't come back on time. The natives raid the colonists in retribution for the Silver Cup incident. As the colony is going through hard times while waiting for Sir Richard Grenville to come back, Sir Francis Drake, one of the members of the colony, proposed to take the colonists back to England, and they agree to leave with him. After some time, Sir Richard Grenville comes back to find no one on the island and decides to go back to bring people to make a new colony. But he leaves some men on the island and tells them he will come back for them. This, then, was the state of affairs in the winter of 1586 to 87, when John White, employed by Raleigh, offers to lead a civilian colonial expedition to Virginia with the second colony. Most of the group that sailed with him were from London, of the artisan and middle-class backgrounds, seeking economic opportunity and perhaps religious freedom. The second colony ships arrived on the coast of Roanoke in the summer of 1587, and that's when they discover the first mysterious disappearance of those few men that Grenville had left behind. But it was no big deal, or more like, can't just go back to England now. There, they built a new settlement once again. Unfortunately, relations with the Native Americans were strained, but things were still on the brighter side until one of the colonists got murdered and the colony was left dependent on their own supplies from England. John White tried hard to help his people carve out a new life on the island, but the situation kept on getting worse. In the month of August in 1587, John White set out back to England to gather more supplies for his people. He bade them farewell and assured them they would return as soon as possible. But things didn't go as planned, and it wasn't until 3 years later, in 1590, he was able to return back to his people. When he reached Roanoke Island, there was no trace of even the colony's houses, let alone the inhabitants. So, what happened to the whole colony? What happened to his daughter and his son-in-law? He couldn't find any explanation until he came across a wooden post on which was carved one word: Croatoan. The only suspicious clue: had the Croatoan natives attacked the colony? No other evidence was found on the island. There were no signs of bones or carved Maltese crosses, signs of which could have indicated that the settlers were attacked or killed. Over time, these settlers came to be known as the Lost Colony, because no one had heard of them ever again. But as time has passed, historians have come up with several theories. One theory is that the carved word Croatoan indicated that the settlers willingly moved to the Croatoan island and joined the Native Americans for protection and supplies, when their leader failed to return in time. Archaeologists studied tree rings on the island in 1998 and came to the conclusion that there was a drought within the time frame when the settlers may have evacuated the island. Another theory was that the colonists were attacked by the hands of warring Native American tribes, or even the Spanish, who may have traveled from Florida to attack the colony at Roanoke. And as we know, the Anglo-Spanish War was in full effect at the time. And then there is another theory that the settlers fell victim to disease and sickness in the New World. Some historians even say that the settlers may have tried to return to England on their own and got lost at sea. And then there is the theory that John White came back to the island, found everyone dead, and when he returned back to England, instead of telling everyone about the death, which would have proved bad for the colonial movement, he told the Queen how they had gone missing. So, there is a possibility he made up the whole story of the wooden post to keep the whole story a mystery, and more importantly, keep colonists moving to North America from England. Apart from these theories, some also propose a host of paranormal theories which are obviously based on speculation. The historical accounts have yet to provide any real evidence, and paranormal accounts are far from having any truth. Nevertheless, for the fun of it, people suggest that there was a zombie outbreak in the colony which led to cannibalism, which is why no bodies were found. And others say that the zombies ate all the bodies, and then when they ran out of humans to munch on, they themselves died out and decomposed, and that's why we don't find any bodies. If we take a closer look at this theory, maybe we can say there was an outbreak of a certain disease in the colony, but that doesn't go too well with the cannibalism. On the other hand, we could say that the colonists went cannibal due to no food supplies, but even that is a little far-fetched. And do cannibals also eat the bones? I don't think so. Bones are usually left for jewelry, right? And as for the part that the zombies died out of hunger and decomposed, how can that be possible in only 3 years? It takes 8 to 12 years for a human body to decompose to skeleton and bones, and depending on the condition, it could take up to thousands of years. In recent years, however, historians are claiming it is highly likely that the Roanoke colonists began living with the Algonquin tribe and adapted to their way of life. it was more probable that the colonists who were abandoned on the shores of the New World would likely have cast their lot with the Native Americans who knew how to survive. Unfortunately, nothing was done about all these missing people and no searches were made until Jamestown was settled in 1607. Early Jamestown settlers reported speaking with some Native Americans who claimed to know of tribes that could speak English and dress like Europeans. They also reported that there were settlements in the South that resembled the houses made on Roanoke. These reports led many historians to believe that the Roanoke colonists simply moved to a new settlement and joined the native tribes. After generations had passed, with marriages among the settlers and the natives, a new tribe called the Lumbee, which is native to North Carolina, may have formed. The idea of the massacred Roanoke colony, however, gained popularity in the 19th century when the idea of Europeans choosing to live among Native Americans went against the racist ideology. In particular, White's Roanoke-born granddaughter, Virginia Dare, became a symbol of white supremacy. Some scholars, however, say it's likely Virginia Dare assimilated with the Algonquin and her own grandchildren never even realized she was English. Given the lack of concrete evidence behind the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists, scientists are still trying to determine if any artifact can offer insight to what actually transpired. In 2015, a team of archaeologists with the First Colony Foundation excavated a site they believed was an X covered up on White's map with a patch, possibly to conceal the colony's location if the document fell in the hands of the Spanish. In 2020, a dig at Hatteras also found artifacts that might have belonged to the missing colonists. The Croatoan Archaeological Society unearthed European artifacts, including parts of a sword and a gun. According to this evidence, scholars are now considering whether the lost colonists split into groups and joined different Algonquin tribes. What do you think happened to the Roanoke colony? Share your thoughts in the comments section below.